So I'm sitting in a schoolyard in Ghana, and this little girl looks up at me and says, "Auntie Molly, my brother has autism." And I'm shocked. I can't believe that she knows what autism is, let alone has a connection to autism. A few minutes earlier, she'd asked me what I'd done while I was living in the US. And I was going to explain to her, as I had to most people who had asked, that I was a teacher. It was just easier that way. I didn't have to explain what autism is. I didn't have to explain that, yes, you probably have autism in Ghana. No, I don't really know. And yet she'd said, my brother has autism. You see, I'd arrived in Ghana a few weeks prior. A family that I worked with in Seattle, Washington at the time, had asked me to move to Ghana with them. So I got out a globe, asked if I would need a passport, and said, sure. It made sense at the time. So here I was in Ghana, and I wanted to know where her brother went to school. Not too sure, she said. So after school, I asked her mom, who I thought for sure would know where her brother went to school. And I walked up to her, I was ready to introduce myself, from a really small town, and I love meeting people, and I'll talk to anyone who will listen. And she said, I don't have a son. I thought, oh, probably not who I meant to see. Try again tomorrow. So the next day I paid a little more attention, and I walked up to who I was pretty sure was this girl's mother. And she's walking in the opposite direction. So I could tell she wasn't too interested in what I had to say. So a few days go by, and a teacher says, oh, my sister has a child with these problems. Maybe you can help. I just wanted to help. Absolutely. So after school, they come when everyone's gone home, so nobody can see who this child is. And they show up in the schoolyard. And I recognize the woman immediately. I just tried to accost her for 2 days in a row on the playground. And here she is with her son. And she tells me the story of her experiences, that her son had been diagnosed while they were living outside the country. And quite frankly, she wasn't sure why her daughter even knew the word. They hadn't spoken about it since they'd returned to Ghana. She explains to me more about what it had been like to have a child with autism in Ghana. She explains to me that the locally accepted belief is that kids with autism are possessed. This is not to say everybody feels this way. This was her experience, and these are experiences I've heard from around the world. So she tells me about this, and I just want to help. And that's really what's guided my work at the Global Autism Project for the last 14 years. It's really just been this desire to help. Because we're taught, right? As kids, we're taught that helping is good and doing for others is good, and that's what makes us good, and we should do for others as much as we can. But in those years, I've learned a thing or two about help and how to help. And I've learned that there's a distinction between doing with people and doing for people. When we do for people, we come to them and we say things like, I'm here for you and I can do this thing. But what we really mean is, I'm here and I'm going to help you in the way that I think is best. When we do for people without even realizing it, we're making assumptions about what they're capable of and what they're not capable of. And when we do with people, that conversation changes. That conversation sounds a little bit more like, what do you feel you need? What do you think is best? What can I help you with? And this sounds really simple, right? This is not the way work is being done around the world currently. Every so often, shoes will literally come out of the sky, well-meaning shoes, used crappy shoes that we've donated, and they'll literally land in a village somewhere. And this sounds really great, but you know who this doesn't sound too great to? The cobbler who lives in town, who's making shoes and trying to sell them in order to feed his family. And there are schools all over the world that are literally empty buildings with no teachers and very little furniture, if any. Because somebody has built the school for the community, they have not built the school with the community. So when I first got to Ghana, one of the things that I most remember is driving around in the car with the dad of the kid who I'd moved there with, and we'd see some of these schools, these empty schools with no furniture and very few children, no students, and he would say to me, an NGO did that. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And we'd see SUVs driving around that looked totally out of place and completely ridiculous in this strange land they were in. He'd say, an NGO did that. And we'd see other sort of half-baked projects, and he'd say, well, that's the work of an NGO. So I've always been good at spelling, and I quickly learned in Ghana, in the local language, that the DZ made the J sound. So this was a spelling that I had come up with for NGO, and I never wanted to be called an NGO. So I stand here today as the founder and CEO of the Global Autism Project, an NGO, or non-governmental organization, as it turns out. And I started the organization for two reasons. One, because I really believe that everyone, everywhere in the world, should have access to reach their potential. And two, because my dad will tell you, because I didn't know any better. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better than how to not help people who were, at that time, my own community who needed help. And we've had over 200 volunteers travel with our organization all over the world. And in the interview, we say to them, why do you want to go? They say, I just want to help. I say, okay, we'll work on that later. And they say, and I want to know what autism looks like in other parts of the world. Well, spoiler alert, autism is the same all over the world. The questions that parents ask, the questions that families ask, the questions that those with autism ask are the same. Will he be independent? Will he be happy? And they're not much different than the questions we ask of our own kids if they don't have autism. Will they be happy? Will they be independent? Humans, the very core of who we are the same. What if, when we started conversations, we started with that basic belief that all people are the same? We didn't make judgments about whether or not they were capable or whether or not they knew what was best for their community. What if we sat at tables with those who had been incarcerated and said, what do you feel is best? What can we do together? And I've had those conversations, I've sat with those people, and I've learned time and time again that we can study for months and even years to try to understand what we feel is best for other people, or we can collaborate with them. And you can learn more in a simple collaboration, in a simple conversation with someone than you can learn in hours and years of studying. So the next time you feel compelled to help, I encourage you to consider what will happen if I do this with you. Thank you.